Huh, never heard that before. What's up, folks? This is Roto Bowler's official MMA podcast. Tap that. No fights this weekend, so no main card episode, no prelims episode, but we have another interlude episode. And joining me today is he's got a professional record of 6-2. He's on a 4-fight win streak. It is Khai the Shadow Wu. Khai, how's it going, man?
Good. How's it going?
Oh, pretty good. So you've got a fight coming up. It's in Colorado Combat Club for July 24th against Alejandro Rodriguez. What do you know about your opponent as of now, and how did that fight come to be? Is this your first time fighting in Colorado?
Yeah, this is my first time fighting in Colorado. How the fight came to be was I was just given this opportunity. I know he's out of Factory Muay Thai or something like that. I know he's from a gym in Colorado. I know he's got a lot of good training partners, a lot of UFC guys. My management, Dodge Sports, they're the ones that kind of reached out and was like, hey, there's a main event slot for you. You want to take this fight? And when they asked me, it was kind of like I was just like, yeah, any fight we could get. I haven't fought in over a year. So I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And then I believe they already had an opponent in mind for him. And then I accepted. And then he accepted like shortly after too. So it just kind of came together like that. I'll be honest, it happened so fast. I don't remember all the details, but I remember it was something along those lines.
So he's relatively fresh to the professional game. He's 2-1. He's 29 years old. I believe he's coming off 2 straight submission finishes, and one of his other wins at amateur was also a submission win. What is, I know this fight's coming up actually, but in a couple of months. But what does that say to you off the bat? Like, what do you, I know you review some videos. So are you planning on doing any of that with this guy?
Yeah. So yeah, he's only 2-1. He's kind of, newer, but you got to look at his amateur career too, on Tapology at least. And you never know if they've had more, you don't never know if it's on record or whatnot. But if you look at all his fights combined, amateur and pro, and with his jiu-jitsu experience, he has more experience than me. Yeah, I'm 6-2 as a pro, but I mean, an amateur fight is almost no different than a pro fight, in my opinion, other than, yeah, of course, the level, but look at the rule set, it's kind of the same thing. So he's had a lot more experience than me. And not only that, but, this is his hometown and he's a good grappler. I started off doing jujitsu. So a lot of people like in MMA forget that I do jujitsu. Like I started off with jujitsu at the age of 9. I competed in over 40 grappling tournaments. I placed at Pan Am's. Although it was a white belt, it was still, there was 40 plus people. I believe.
Still Pan Am's, man.
Yeah, I know. I placed second there. US Open Jiu-Jitsu, which is a big tournament for us in California. And then as a blue belt, I've only competed probably 15, 20 tournaments. And in the beginning, it was rough because I was a white belt that just turned blue belt. And a lot of the blue belts had already been 3-4 year blue belts. So I got smashed in the beginning. But, after a year or so as a blue belt, I got the experience. But my point is just, I think people forget, I shouldn't say people forget. I should just say that I haven't really showcased my jiu-jitsu. And even when I have in the past, it wasn't well put together. It was like, I'd hit the ground and I'd be like, oh, we're doing jiu-jitsu now. Whereas now I've kind of understood that an MMA fight, there's no such thing as jiu-jitsu. It's still MMA, I just blended everything in a little bit more and understood the transitional, there isn't a transition between when you're standing up, it's Muay Thai, and then you hit the ground, it's all of a sudden jiu-jitsu. No, there is no transition. It's just one and the same. Once you take someone down, boom, still MMA. So I think I had to really get that through my head because of the lack of experience I had, as an amateur. And so I think things are clicking. And if he wants to do jiu-jitsu and take it to the ground, I think it's time to show my jiu-jitsu, to everyone.
Well, for folks that have not seen any of Kai's previous fights, attacks that Peruvian necktie pretty aggressive. I rewatched all your fights today. Even I was like, "Ooh, he really likes going for that Peruvian necktie." You got it against Jason Vergara in WTD. What about the Peruvian necktie tickles your fancy so much?
So it's actually the grip is the difference. It's actually not the Peruvian. And I don't, the only reason why I say this, not to sound cool or anything, but I just don't want to disrespect the Peruvian necktie. It's a grip difference that I use because my arms aren't as long. So I do this. I mean, there's a Japanese necktie out there. There's a Peruvian necktie. So I just called it a Chinese necktie, it's just a grip difference. I could always show you, but that's the difference. And the reason why is because when I was a white belt, I remember we did an in-house tournament, and it was kind of like open rules. Like, it doesn't matter what belt you are, just compete against each other. And I lucked out. I beat 2 blue belts. And then I got the black belt in the finals. And he kind of underestimated me. He'd kill me, I was like 15, 16. He was going to kill me, but he shot on a sloppy takedown. And then when I sprawled him out, I just necktied him like that. I watched it off WWEC, maybe CB Dalloway did it, or I watched it once in the UFC. I forget. I think I want to credit CB Dalloway for the where I saw it from the WEC days. And then I pulled it off against him, and he was just kind of too late to defend it. Ever since then, it's kind of been like that first experience for me to tap a black belt, and that's been my move ever since in jiu-jitsu. I mean, I have all sorts of submissions. I come from the guerrilla jiu-jitsu system, which is huge on the judo throws, and then the armbar system from Dave Camarillo, who's my head coach. And so it's funny, we're all like arm attackers, but then I've just kind of delved into the choke system a little bit more, because I feel like if I broke someone's arm, I've heard stories and I've seen where people still keeps fighting. But if I choke you, no matter how hard you try to, resist, you get choked unconscious. And I've never had anyone resist my chokes long enough to where even after they pass out, they keep fighting, that's got to be some kind of like inhuman type thing going on there. But yeah, so that's kind of why I took a liking to the necktie. And also in MMA, you sprawl on people a lot more. People shoot in a lot more. So that position is kind of more presentable. And then because of that, it's kind of like a threat. Like, hey, if you want to shoot in on me, I'll sprawl you out. And then you have to deal with that. Granted, smaller guys who are, kind of stalkier, like Alejandro, I believe he's a little bit shorter than all my previous opponents. He has like the weird body frame. So it might not even work on him. But when I hit that submission in tournaments, it's always been a very high ratio for me, so that's kind of why I like it so much. But then again, I've been training with Darren BC, who fought Kid Yamamoto in the UFC. He's trains with Ryan Hall extensively, so I've been playing around with that heel hook system a little bit. So I mean, who knows? Our philosophy is position before submission, so you won't see me go for some crazy submissions unless I'm in a good position.
So you touched on like the guerrilla jiu-jitsu influence a little bit there. So I know you've been with Omni for a while too. What would you identify about both guerrilla and Omni that are unique, as compared to, the other camps that are other? What is such a good, unique fit for those two places for you?
Yeah, so with guerrilla jiu-jitsu, we have a very interesting system. Dave Camarillo, who's also my brother-in-law, he blended judo and jiu-jitsu together. We have 3 stripes in the guerrilla logo. It stands for wrestling, judo, and jiu-jitsu. You have to understand, Dave used to be the head coach at AKA. He worked with John Fitch, Koscheck, and Swick, and Cain Velasquez. He was in the corner of Cain Velasquez when he beat Brock. So Dave has an extraordinary amount of experience from those guys and how to train them and stuff, and all the wrestling he picked. Even Cormier, I can't forget to mention Cormier, and Rockhold and all those guys, like the Strike Force late Strike Force days when they're about to be done. Dave's worked with all those guys, so Dave definitely understands how to combine judo, jiu-jitsu, and wrestling in a very smooth way where there's not a lot of lag time. So that's where the system's a little different, because in jiu-jitsu, you see a lot of guys pull guard now, and a lot of, they don't like to stand. And if they do stand, they're not very good at takedowns. Whereas Dave was very big on us sprawling everywhere, attacking the arm whenever we got the chance, from his nickname, him and his brother's nickname, the Arm Hunter, so we were really big on that. And Omni, what's different is, when I came from Guerrilla and Omni, there wasn't a big fight team. There wasn't like a Team Alpha Male or a lot of these big name teams, AKA, where you had 100 fighters at practice. And the reason why I say that might be a positive thing is because let's say you have a fight coming up, and so does, Cormier. The gym's going to mainly focus on Cormier and all the other heavyweights that rank above you. It's not a disrespectful thing. It's just, you got to know your place. You're not up there yet, so you're not, I don't want to say as valued because it sounds kind of, condescending, but it's just, you got to work, you got to work your way up. There's no special treatment. So with Gorilla and Omni, it was more individualized. I got a lot more personal training time. I got to adjust and fix a lot of my weaknesses and strengths in a very short amount of time, because a lot of that time was devoted to me and the handful of fighters. We had less than 10 pro fighters on the team, so it actually kind of worked out because we got to train together a lot, fix a lot of each other's holes in our system, in our game, and then we get to explore outside, go to other gyms and see how it worked out. And we had a lot of friends, so that's what I would say is the biggest difference. Yeah, we don't have the biggest name in the world or the biggest team, but I mean, you got guys like McGregor, you got guys like Adesanya, Robert Whitaker. They didn't come from big name teams, they became a bigger name as they grew. I mean, look at McGregor. I mean, name 3 other guys on his team other than, the main ones like Artem, Gallagher, and the other guy that just fought the Pitbull brother. I apologize.
Peter Queally.
Yeah, Queally. Yeah, but name other guys, and other than that, who were his like world-class coaches and all this stuff? Kavanaugh's great, don't get me wrong, and so is Owen Roddy, but it's just, there's a difference between being great over there, and then you have my brother-in-law Dave Cameron, was ranked number 2 in judo, and then he got his, at 18 years old, he was slaughtering everybody in jiu-jitsu because he got his jiu-jitsu blue belt in like 2 weeks. You know what I'm saying? There's like a little bit of a difference with him coming up with BJ and training with Darren, all these high-level guys. So he gets to kind of really give us a little bit more attention when I started turning pro. He saw that I took it a little bit more seriously. So that's the difference, I'd say, between our gym Omni and Gorilla. That differs from a lot of these bigger, stable team of fighters.
Now, that Gorilla stripe system is like fascinating, and it's so geared towards like success in mixed martial arts.
Yeah, Dave was heavily influenced on the AKA train, when they trained the whole Cormier's wrestling system, Cain Velasquez wrestling system, Fitch's pressure, Koshek's wrestling. He took a lot of that and really just kind of incorporated into like, why is my jiu-jitsu so good? But I will say this, a lot of the stuff that Dave pulls off in tournaments and, all the stuff that he does on social media, I'll be honest, it's very hard to replicate. I wish I was that good, but he was naturally born with the quickest, like quick twitch fibers, muscle fibers and whatnot. Dave's like a special, unique guy. So when you look at Gorilla Jiu-Jitsu and you use him as like the main guy, I'll be honest, it's kind of hard to, step up to the plate and be as good as Dave. So, I do have to slow things down and do other things. And he does change up a little bit of the Gorilla system for me, guys like me who can't keep up, and who isn't as fast. And let's not forget, he started judo when he was like 5. So he could throw anyone on his head, on their heads. And, I kind of just started jiu-jitsu at the age of 9, so as interesting and as cool as it looks, not everyone that trains in Gorilla Jiu-Jitsu ends up like Dave. It's kind of sad.
So this upcoming fight is at bantamweight. And for folks who don't know, you have fought at featherweight several times. You actually won that featherweight belt in California Cage Wars at the beginning of 2019. So have you ever had trouble making bantamweight in the past?
No. So my first 4 pro fights were all bantamweight. The reason why I took that fight was because it was 2 weeks notice. It doesn't show on Tapology, but it was it was a 2.5 week notice fight, up a weight class. So I didn't have to cut weight. And it was for a vacant title. That's the only reason why I took that fight, because it was just there. I'm not a featherweight. I really am not. I walk around at 150, 155. The heaviest I've ever walked around at was 160, but a lot of that was water. But on like, if you don't want me to diet and get ready for a fight, I'm about 154, 155. So I was already done with the fight and I was getting ready to retire. Because it was 3-2 my record, and I thought, I had a huge talk with my coach. I was kind of like, I'm done. He gets a phone call shortly after, and he calls me back, and he's like, "Hey, we just got a fight offer at 145. I know you just gave me that call, blah blah blah." And I was like, "I'm in," So that was like a testament to how dedicated I was to fighting. I had a lot of questions going into my next few fights because 3-2, I didn't think it was that. I don't want to be another guy fighting just for fun. I know I love this lifestyle. It's a martial artist lifestyle, but there are certain things I have to sacrifice going into a fight, family time, relationships, and all this stuff. So I had to really make a decision, and I did. And then that's when I took that fight short notice, came away with it, even with the fractured shin going into that fight, short notice, and it was awesome. So the last two fights, the reason why they were catch weights was because
that's what I was eventually getting to, was what's up with these
yeah,
catch weight fights.
yeah. So the reason why it was catch weight was this. I don't believe in cutting, like, I don't want to say I don't believe in cutting weight, but it's just, it does a lot of damage to your body over time. So the last two fights, because there's no ranking system in Taiwan, there's literally like three other bantamweights like me in Taiwan specifically. And there was no ranking system. There's no way we could fight for a belt for WOTD. I asked them, I said, if I keep winning, which I think I'm on a 5-fight win streak from them. I said, actually, maybe 4 fights. I said, will you guys give me a belt or a title shot? And they said, we're not currently making belts because we only hold 2 events a year. So I said, oh, well, if that's the case, then cutting weight to bantamweight, I don't really get any points. Or going to 145, I don't really get any points, right? They said, correct. So I said, why don't my fights that you guys want me to fight for you guys, why don't we just do it at catch weight at 140? My opponent doesn't want to cut that much weight because he's flying in, from another country. And I'm already in Taiwan, but at the same time, I'm like, what's the point of cutting all that weight if we're not going to get ranked or get a title shot? And, it saves damage on the body. I'll make bantamweight when I get into the UFC, Bellator, ONE FC, any one of these big name organizations. I'll save that for later. So then my opponents agreed. I actually approached the organization with that mindset. I told them if they could pass the message along, and my opponents were like, great. They actually said they could make 35 very easily anyways. It's just kind of hard on them, and no one likes cutting weight. So I was like, perfect, we'll do that. But now in Colorado, this fight, I believe they have belts, and I believe there's a ranking system now in California and also in the United States. So fighting at catchweight doesn't really make too much sense here, if that makes sense, unless I'm just wanting to stay active and then my opponent's like a short notice, and he can't cut that much weight, then I'll do it. But other than that, I've never missed weight once, and I've always made weight, and it's not extremely hard, because I'm kind of a smaller stature guy.
Well, it's like, so 2 of your like most prominent strengths that show through in your fights are your footwork and your head movement. I mean, this is in my opinion, but those are the 2 traits that really stick out the most. And at 145, that they real in the most recent fight you had at featherweight in California Cage Wars, they just both showed through so much, like, obviously with there being a speed advantage and probably an agility advantage there. So I only bring that up to say, like, is 145 a weight you'll consider fighting at, like, going forward, or are you gonna like more focus on one over the other?
I primarily, I'll be honest, I don't care what weight class I really fight at, as long, when I say it makes sense. I know it's very cliche, right? I know it's really cliche because the fighters always say that. When I say it makes sense, I mean, if it's a short notice and I can't cut the 35s, let's say it's a 3-week fight, 3-week notice. I can't make 135. I'll do catch weight or 145. If my opponent really wants it. If he doesn't want it, he wants me to 35, I'm sorry, I just can't do it. I'm not going to sacrifice my body's, like, my health and longevity for a 3-week notice fight that's not even in the UFC or Bellator, like a big stage. When I need to be the company man and make those sacrifices, I will, because that's what they pay me for. But until then, I'm getting paid too little for too much damage on the body. So it's not really a weight class issue. I mean, I definitely want to pursue the 35. My frame, though, if you talk about, let's just say hypothetically speaking, I'm in the UFC now, if you ask me to fight at 45 within the top 10 guys, I don't think I could hang with those guys for, like, Max Holloway, 5'11", 6 foot almost. And you put me in front of him, he's too big. There's no way. He's too big. I can't hang with the top 10. But if you wanted like a fill-in fight for fun, I think I could make that, especially as my pro career progresses. I will get a little bit bigger of a frame, and the weight cutting won't be as hard to 35, just because I have a huge system down now. Every single time I cut weight, it gets easier, in my opinion, with enough time. But I don't think the 45 is something I'm going to pursue, but in order for me to stay active, because if you look at my career, I've stayed very active in the short amount of time I've been a pro. Other than injury sidelining me, I've been pretty active. So I would like to fight at 45 again, or even catch weight at 40, but as of right now, 35 is the main focus. but with enough time, with if I didn't get enough time, I will do the 45 fights.
So, speaking of Bellator, that is where your only two professional losses have come, both in the year 2018, against Cass Bell, who I believe is currently ranked in the Bellator bantamweight
Yes, he is.
rankings, and then Isaiah Batin Gonzalez. So, what kind of learning experience or losses like that? What was the Bellator experience like? I know it being about 3 years ago now. But what I'm saying. What is the different mental approach going into a fight like that, or is there one?
Yeah, I think it was more I psyched myself out because you got to understand, I was a kid in high
You were
school.
22, weren't you?
Yeah, 22, 23, around there. Yes. And then also I used to watch Bellator fights after high school. I'd come home from high school, eat dinner after wrestling practice. As I was eating dinner, I'd watch, Bellator on Spike,
That Askren was like fighting in the mall or something.
yeah, it was crazy. It was
Yeah.
awesome. I was just like, oh man, this is awesome. And then when I got presented that as my second profile, I know a lot of guys make their debut in Bellator as an amateur to fill up as a pro to like their pro debut to fill up the undercard. But you have to understand, I was fighting in San Jose, in where I was born, and it was the fight before the main card started, or it would have been the first fight main card. So I was just like, man, I'm so psyched that I'm actually, it's like, imagine you wanted to be in the NFL or NBA your whole life, and then you just get there like within your second year of college ball. It was very enticing and exciting. I think I psyched myself out though. I should have treated it. I mean, again, I can't really, I have no regrets because it was a great learning experience. The first fight, there was definitely a lot of lessons that I learned to cast belt because I lost in the second. I was winning the fight, second round. I lost due to a guillotine, and it was just because of inexperience. My second fight, though, I don't really look at that fight. I just brush it off because that was a very, very interesting judge's decision on that fight. I dropped my opponent in the second round, took him down 3 times in the first round, even at the end of the bell. So I should have won the round. Round 3 was his. But if that's 2 rounds to 1, simple math. I just don't understand the judges that night. And they had a lot of questionable calls, by the way. So that fight, it's one of those. From speaking with a lot of experienced pros, they're like, you just got to brush that one off. Don't look at it. Don't look back into the past. Just keep going forward. So honestly, after it's all said and done, I really just wish I get that chance again at Bellator to kind of redeem my losses. I'm more seasoned now. I'd love to get another chance at them. So Bellator is awesome. I love all these organizations. I'm sure, with someone like you and a lot of these other media guys that cover the sport, I know there's like this. Bellator is obviously not the UFC, but in my eyes, I know the level of guys that are in Bellator, and I'd love to just get back in there and try my hand again, even if it's just for one fight. It's just something that I think before my career ends, I at least want one W in Bellator, and then maybe one in ONE FC, and then get a win in the UFC, before it's all said and done.
Well, that's the thing is right now there's never been more opportunity, for people to make a living as fighters with the UFC, ONE, Bellator, Ryzen, PFL, and then if you're a female fighter, there's also Invicta, and
Yeah.
those are just the major promotions, not even the feeder promotions. And then there's the Ultimate Fighter and the Contender Series.
Right.
So it's nice to see that there's that many promotions that can put on a quality product, but also with Bellator and ONE, depending on the weight class, there's at least 3 different people in some cases that can make the case for being number 1 in the world.
Oh, hands down. Yeah. I mean, I can't, as a, someone who does this, fights for a living, to see how many options you have. It's amazing. I love seeing all this, like, it's just, everywhere you can go now, there's like, big name organizations. Asia's still developing, but at the same time, you have Brave over in India and in the middle. I don't want to, don't quote me on here, but Brave FC is in like, Bahrain and stuff like that. And then you have, ONE FC, you have the UFC, the PFL. I can't even believe I forgot about that. Pettis just got signed and all these other stuff. So it's Roy McDonald too. And as a fighter, it's just like, man, I'm so excited. If UFC doesn't work out, there's plenty of other organizations for me to fight for, and to be able to stay that active. It's great. I really cherish this time in MMA. It's so exciting. There's fights every other weekend. It's good to see how well the sport is doing. It just shows that there's a healthy amount of income for all these organizations to be able to survive, and they kind of found their market, and MMA is just growing more and more popular. Even in Taiwan, WOTD, I think there's a lot of potential. They haven't even reached their potential yet. The last fight I had, we almost sold out the whole, 1,000 to 2,000 seater stadium. And the thing you have to understand is in Asia, the culture of fighting is not very big. Maybe in Japan it is, and Kung Fu in China, but for a kid, as if you were a parent, for your kid to go compete in this sport, and there's no stable income and whatnot, it's very taboo. It's not something that you want your kids to do. But the fact that I was able to go there and sell out a show headline, and so many people after stayed, and it's just I'm seeing the growth. So I can't wait to see what happens the next few years with what the UFC is doing, and a lot of these organizations like you said, Vic, all this stuff, they're working with each other now. You have Clarissa Shields, who's a boxer who now came into MMA. It's very exciting times.
All right, so you mentioned WOTD, and for folks once again unfamiliar, you have some of your pro fights have been in Sacramento, California, some have been in Stockton, California, and the others have been in Taiwan. Yep. Now, this might be tough to describe, but what is it like fighting in the Stockton, Sacramento area, and what is it like fighting in Taiwan? I know you're quite popular with all crowds.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's news to me. It's awesome to hear. But I think in Sacramento and Stockton. Okay, so Stockton, let me start there. I made my I made my pro amateur debut in Sacramento. So when I fought in Sacramento, it was exciting because the guy has fought for the organization before, Titans Cage, and he had a ton of fights. Officially, he had 3. He was 0-3 or 1-3, and I was making my amateur debut. But as the fight got closer, I found out that he was 6-12 or something. He had so many other underground fights I didn't get to see, so it was super scary.
My god!
I had so many excuses in my head. I was like, I want to pull out of this fight. This is so scary. But then once I got in there too, I kind of froze, and the lights were super bright. The cage was kind of yellow. The canvas was kind of yellow, so it was reflecting the light. I don't know, man. I was like a deer in headlights. And then out of nowhere, I just clicked. I was like, you know what? I think I'm not thrown enough. So what happens if I throw 22 punches straight? And then I just threw this Mortal Kombat finisher on him, and I knocked him out in the first round. And I thought I was going to be jumping off the cage, screaming and yelling. But then after that, I was just like, man, this is so much easier than I had thought. Why didn't I just do that? So I just, took a bow, and the crowd was going nuts. I love that in America, the culture is you drink and you watch fights, and people who don't train just yell random slurs, punch in the face. Yeah, I have a certain respect for that, in the sense that it's you're braver than me. I would never be in the crowd shouting something I don't know anything about. That's scary to me, because there's so many fighters sitting around you. You don't even know who's who, who could beat you up. And you're just yelling random stuff you suck, drinking beer, getting belligerent. I mean, that takes some courage to do that in public. I couldn't make a fool of myself like that in public, so it's kind of funny to me. In Sacramento, it was very good, though. The crowd was awesome because they had security there and whatnot. Stockton's a whole different ball game, though, because you have his crowd, and people are getting fights in the outside of the cage. It was just so exciting. I'm like, wow, this is awesome. I could say I've done it all almost,
Electric.
Stockton has that certain type of energy where they like dog fights, They didn't want me to fight clean. I got dropped in my fight, woke back up. I got knocked out of my fight, woke back up, took the guy down, and the crowd went nuts. And after the fight, so many fans came up to me. They're like, dude, you're not even Asian. You're Mexican, man. You're Mexican. You have that Mexican fight in you. I almost started laughing. So there was a few people that, that were just, they were kind of randoms. I didn't even know who they were, but they were fans. And I was like, oh, wow, really? You like that kind of fight? They're like, dude, that's awesome. So Stockton and Sacramento were really cool. San Jose, very similar. America in general, I think it's just very similar vibes. There's drinking and allowed and whatnot. But in Taiwan and Asia specifically, there's not a lot of booing. They feel, it's just the culture is different. They don't feel like they should boo because they don't know what it's like to do the sport, and they pay tickets to watch a fight. They're not going to boo. Imagine you order food and it comes out. In American culture, it'd be like, it's disgusting, I'm going to send it back. In Asian culture, it'd be like, okay, I don't want to make a scene. So we're very like against.
I'm with that. I'm not a sender backer. Like
Yeah.
it's just it it weighs too heavily on me. I don't think I've done it ever in my life. I understand why people do it. It's just not for me.
Yeah, no, I understand it either. It just, I think in the Asian culture, people are a little bit more hesitant to take matters into their own hands, and also they're a lot more, when I say respectful, sometimes it could be bad too, but at the same time they just don't like confrontation. So I think in Taiwan, when I fought for them, there was no booing. It was dead silent unless you land a kick or punch on someone, and then the crowd kind of goes nuts. They clap, they cheer, and then they stay for every single fight. They show up at the the earliest prelim that you have on the card. They will show up and watch that because they want to get their money's worth. I might get some hate on this, but Asians are kind of cheap in that sense. They get every bang for their buck. They make sure they get everything. And then also there's no alcohol involved. So there's definitely culture of you can't eat or drink in the stadium. They want to keep it clean. So what people do is they go eat beforehand and then eat after, and then they celebrate and then whatnot. So it's a little bit different of a culture. But I mean, when I fight in Taiwan, it's like dead quiet. When you walk out, they cheer for you, but then right when the fight starts, right when the bell rings, they can hear you breathing, they can hear you talking, they could hear every jab that lands, every leg kick that lands. And it's just, they want you to put on a show, but they're patient too. They love grappling. Like even when you mount on someone really slowly, they'll go, ooh, it's very like, you hear them, they get excited, even though they don't know too much about the sport just yet. But there's a different, like a respect factor. So that's what's different in Asia. I could hear my corners, where sometimes here, the people are just screaming so loud, I can't even hear my corners,
Yeah, like that. There are plenty of moments where I'm watching MMA that's happening in America and, the boos start raining down. There are plenty of times where that does bother me because it's like, there's plenty of times where people are booing and they don't really know what they're seeing. And,
Exactly.
I at least appreciate that about, when I watched, the fights you did in Taiwan, it seems like the crowd at least, maybe they don't have as much exposure, but they definitely like give off the air of being like a little bit more informed about the sport, and I think they react also accordingly to like you said, like if you get mount or there's a submission attempt or a sweep, or it seems like the reactions are always very like proportionate and measured to like what the move actually means in the fight.
Yeah, it has to do with the culture, to be honest with you. It's all about the culture, the way people were raised over there and the way they grew up. Not saying it's better or worse, it's all preference, but I really do like it when I fight out there because it's so quiet. The silence is kind of deafening, like I hit a guy with the jab and everyone makes a noise a little bit, but you could still hear it. I'm like, ooh, this is scary. It kind of makes it's like fighting without a crowd, and then when you do something kind of nice, you can hear everyone and then they're quiet again. So it was like, it's almost no different if I was to fight in the pandemic, to fight with the crowd in Asia. It would almost be no different. But it's really exciting. It's something that it's hard to describe and for you to understand fully unless you were there too. It's so awesome, and that's why I love fighting in Taiwan. And also, I love growing the sport over there too. There's not a lot of fighters, and it's slowly growing, but because of WOTD and how much they like, how much of a liking they had towards me and how well I did in terms of ticket sales, viewership, they really liked it, and they just kind of ended up I kind of fitting that poster boy role over there, especially with me not having any tattoos. I think that's a thing in Taiwan culture for a lot of like the public fans. They like the fact that I didn't have parents. They would come watch a fight. They'd be like, oh, my kid, he's like 5. I want him to do jujitsu now. I was like, no way. You guys want him to be a doctor or a lawyer and tutor him his whole life, And then now I have parents that are telling me like, oh, you're so polite. You have no tattoos. I want my kid to learn jujitsu now. And I'm like, this is insane. So, I really feel like Taiwan has a lot of potential, and I could definitely do some good things out there and elevate the sport. And I'd really love to.
How did you settle on like fighting back and forth between California and Taiwan? And do you have like a place you train in Taiwan, or is that a place you've just been fighting?
So I have a place. So my mom lives in Taiwan, and she does business over there. And I've been going to Taiwan. I lived in Taiwan when I was a kid, from third grade to fifth grade. So I travel back and forth every year, like during summer, just to see family and whatnot over there. It wasn't until I turned pro, they gave me my pro debut out there, and it was at the same arena that my mom used to sneak out when she was younger and go watch concerts. And I was like,
Sweet.
this is insane. Like, you know, you couldn't have wrote a better story, to be honest with you. And I was on the poster. My mom can, you know, I've never really made my parents proud in the sense that I wasn't very good at school. You know, I'm not too proud to say that, but it's just school wasn't for me, you know. I wasn't the best in school, but I was glad. I always want to make my parents proud. And then, you know, I went to college for a year and a half, 2 years, just it wasn't for me. And then I committed fully to fighting. And then I was getting pressured by my parents to, you know, like either, you know, do something with your life or go to school. And then when I got that opportunity to turn pro, I just took it because I was like, okay, I don't want to turn pro in Bellator with a 3-1 amateur record in MMA. That's horrible. I just get slaughtered. So I said, if I was going to turn pro anywhere, I would wait a year before I turned pro, if that makes sense. Like just get a year of like solid training with high level guys. But then when they presented me that that pro debut in Taiwan in front of, you know, my family and friends, I was like, okay, win or lose, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. I'm going to do it. And then when I went in there and knocked out my opponent in like under 60 seconds, I was ecstatic. I did it. And my parents were a little bit more supportive after that. And then, you know, now they're very supportive now, but even in the past, I didn't want to say they weren't supportive. They just didn't want to see me get hurt. And I completely understand that now, you know, as I get a little bit older and mature up, hopefully, you know, but I understood why they didn't want me to fight. So when I got that opportunity to turn pro in Taiwan, opened the show, the first legitimate pro fight in Taiwan. I mean, ONE FC's been there one time in the past, but it just wasn't rocking like WOTD was, you know, because it was just so long ago. MMA was such a new sport. But yeah, I mean, I was just ecstatic. I took that debut and then I ended up on the news shortly after. I remember we party. I never go clubbing. I never drink. But after that fight, I kind of had to. My coaches and friends, all my friends from California, they flew out for like 2 weeks. They stayed with me in my house. I remember we partied till like 4 a.m. at the club. People were like, hey, did you just fight today? We saw you on YouTube or like on TV. Or we saw you on poster. Hey, aren't you the Shadow? They like, I remember the coolest part was when we went to the club, me and my friends all forgot our passports. You need a passport to if you're a foreigner, you know, to show up into the club. The bouncer recognized me. He was like, hey, didn't you just fight earlier? And I was like, yeah. He's like, can I get he got a picture with me and then he let everyone in and we were like shocked. And then I don't drink often, but you know, I had a beer or two with my coach because we've been doing this for so long and finally paid off. And then when we got back to the hotel, this is a little funny story, but when we got back to the hotel at like 6 a.m, I get like 20 calls just nonstop. And I don't have a phone number in Taiwan. It was more of an app, this Line app. And this lady calls me and she's like, hey, I've been calling you because I'm from TVBS, which is the CNN of Taiwan, basically. They're like, oh, I managed to contact the promotion and get your, you know, Line contact. Is there any way you'd be interested in doing an interview? I was like, what? Like, you know, imagine CNN calling an MMA fighter after, you know, making their debut. So I was like, heck yeah. So then me and all my friends got up, got dressed. We, you know, got some energy, went to the gym, which is called iFighting. Kemp is the matchmaker of Taiwan. I've known him for a very long time, just because I always train at his gym. He's actually a referee for ONE FC, and he's the commentator for UFC in Taiwan. So he has a little bit of a, you know, a background, like you know, in this stuff. So I used his gym and I did the whole interview. And then me and my mom were on TV for like, you know, the next few days at 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock at those like, you know, the hot hours. And then that's when I kind of got a little bit more of a fan base and I got a little bit more people looked into who I was. And they're like, wow, this is awesome. So that was the most, like, that kicked everything off. After that, I knew I had a responsibility from there on out. You know, I needed to really train hard. I have I have the chance to do something great for a country that doesn't have any MMA involvement, really. You know, I mean, there's OGs out there. Don't get me wrong. You know, there's a lot of OG fighters who are awesome, but, you know, they're getting a little bit older and they told me the same thing. They're like, hey, you have to carry the torch. You know, you got to do this. We paved the way for guys like you know, so don't quit on me. And I was like, yeah, you got it. So that's kind of how everything came together. And it was really great.
Are you or anybody in your family fans of any CPBL teams?
No, I mean, honestly, my family, they're not into sports. My brother's a pharmacist, my sister's a optometrist, my other brother's a nurse, but he just became a anesthesiologist. My other sister worked for like a health or insurance company, this and that. So it's just none of my siblings are into sports. I'm like the only one that I'm the black sheep of the family. That's honestly the truth.
I only asked because back when MLB had their like suspended season, back when COVID started, I was up like every morning at 5:30, watching like the Rakuten Monkeys play. Like that became my CPBL team because it was the only baseball
Oh,
on. So I developed a love for Taiwanese sports last year during COVID.
yes, their baseball team is very famous in Taiwan.
Yeah, that it was a lot of fun to watch. And it's kind of something you see with the fighting game in Taiwan too, is like, there's definitely cultural differences in the way that crowds react, but like there's a showmanship quality. And you saw it with, just the visuals of some of your walkouts that you've done in Taiwan. There's
Yeah.
that showmanship quality.
Yeah. Yeah. It's man, I love it out there. I can't wait to fight again. Talking about it just makes me super pumped that I even have a fight. I'm grateful for it, but I just can't wait till things open back up. COVID's kind of, in the dust, and we can go back and compete. That's something I really look forward to. And yeah, the showmanship. I mean, you got to create a little spectacle for them. It's not even disrespectful or anything to my opponent. I'm not trying to come off as disrespectful, but these people don't pay for fights just to watch a fight. They want a show, and that's what McGregor did so successfully. But I can't emulate McGregor. I'm not good at trash talk. I can't even take myself seriously if I start calling people out. I just couldn't do it. That's not me. So my style is a little bit more, I engage with the fans a lot more. A lot of movies that we used to watch growing up, like, for example, in America culture, it'd be like The Godfather, The Shining, a lot of these old movies I try to take from in Taiwan, and I try to like remix the theme of the soundtrack of those old movies, and I try to walk out with like, there's this movie called God of Gamblers, Saint of Gamblers, and I try to walk out with cards with the same music, throwing cards around. It's just kind of fun, it definitely, I think it made me stand out from like the normal fighters, and that was really cool.
So were some of the travel restrictions that were on Taiwan over the past year, was that one of the obstacles to fighting over the period of the pandemic?
Yeah, I could go back to Taiwan, but the problem is if I go back, I need to quarantine for 14 days. And imagine if I'm training for a fight, I go fly out there 2 weeks before the fight, quarantine. I still need to, test to make sure I don't have COVID, which I need to wait another 2 more days. Imagine me stuck in a hotel room for 2 weeks. How much training can I really get, So it was too hard. And then an opponent who's flying in, like, let's say from Korea, Japan, China, it's just anywhere else, Australia, they would have to quarantine too. So there was no way they could make it work. So when they hosted fights this past year, they've hosted 3 events, all amateurs, but it would be local guys, so they wouldn't bring in other talent from, outside the country. And it made sense. I mean, I understand why they did that. They wanted to be safe. If you look at COVID right now, the best country in the world that has handled it is Taiwan. They had never fully locked down. They have the least amount of deaths. They did great. It's just in the culture to wear masks all the time. And they're also smaller. You have to understand that Taiwan's an island, so they can shut down their borders quick and then reopen it up whenever they wanted to, or they deemed it was safe. And they also did a lot of contact tracing because of how small the population, how much smaller the population is compared to the rest of the world, like America, and all this stuff. And so it was a lot safer for them to do things the way they did. So that's why I didn't really find an appealing, like an idea to go back. If I did go back, it'd just be to teach seminars, which I've done in the past. And then staying in America, there was hope of me fighting. There's events still going on in America as quarantined and COVID tested as all these tournaments and fights were. LFA had fights, CFFC had fights, CES had fights. So I was really hoping and holding on to the notion that I could get a fight not in California, I'm sorry, throughout the rest of the world, Florida, Texas, all that. So I just, and also the level of training too. It's a lot different from, Taiwan. The level of training here is, I mean, the sport, imagine California, you have Khabib, the best fighter in the lightweight division, the history, and arguably, maybe pound for pound, one of the top 5 greatest fighters of all time. He's in California, man. I can't tell you how many fighters are out of California. So the level here is way higher than Taiwan. No disrespect to Taiwan, but it's just the truth. So if I wanted to get good during this, during COVID, the shutdowns and whatnot, I made a pact with my training partners. We trained out of my garage, makeshift mats, bags. I had it all, so I could at least still stay active. Whereas in Taiwan, the level of training would just be with a bunch of amateur fighters who are very good and full potential, but they look to me to lead the practice, and I just couldn't get good at me leading the practice the whole time. If that makes sense.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you know, there's so many camps out of California that have been there. They're not only good, they've been there for, decades on decades. And, the same is true for, Florida and, several other states. It's, there's a reason that people flock from all over the world, from Brazil, from Japan to Australia, from Australia and Canada, to certain spots in California and Florida.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly, it. And I during the pandemic, I actually got a friend of mine to invite me to invite only gym, Black House, the infamous Black House, with Kenny Johnson and Coach Rage over there. My friend Zeta Zhang, she's a first Chinese WWE wrestler to wrestle in WWE. So she was really cool. She introduced me to Black House because she used to want to train to fight in MMA. She did fight in MMA, but she wanted to go pro, and then she went the WWE route because she's got everything going for her there. And I just thought, I was like, you know what? I need to train at some high level gyms, and I'm also in LA. And she just introduced me to Kenny Johnson, who's the nicest coach in the world, in my opinion. And he's high level, trained with all the who's who. So I went out there and I trained for a week, and then made friends with Brady, who fought on the Contender Series, and Brady Huang. And he's been a good friend and training partner ever since. Him and I fought locally in SF, San Jose, for a while. We never crossed paths really, but it wasn't until I went out there, we knew of each other, and we're like, hey, let's train together, man. And, he has what I need and I have what he needs, striking, exchanging with grappling. So it was awesome. And I plan on going back there. I've been back there like at least 2 or 3 times now. And it's just every single time I go there, the level of training is insane. It's different from, I would say, SoCal is just all about grit and toughness a lot. And those guys are just like insane beast wrestlers. Whereas in the Bay Area, it's a little bit more finesse. You don't have that killer mentality other than Stockton, where Diaz is from. You don't have that, like, you have everyone that's kind of pretty. You know what I mean? Like, they fight a little bit more technical out here. Whereas in SoCal, they're just like, they're brawling in practice. Their fight's a fight. These guys are a little bit more grittier, whereas the fight is more finesse in the Bay Area. So I definitely needed some of that, and I've been very grateful to go train there ever since.
So just being around, such high caliber gyms and training partners and coaches, do you think that also, has a hand in, getting word to, people in the higher up promotions, the UFC, Bellator one, that, you're a name to be watched out for in those circles?
I think so, but I never looked at it as that. I never looked at, what, I need to make friends here because they'll get me there. It was just more like, what, I don't care if this guy has all the pull in the world and I need to be best friends with him so you could get me in. I really think my style, the stuff that I put out on all my social media, the way I interact with people, and the way my fighting style is, and the way I market myself, I definitely think that will travel further than if you're just friends with someone. It's almost like you can't be denied because you're that interesting, that you're that appealing. And don't get me wrong, I know, one of the owners is LFA guy. The LFA owner is out of Black House, but I've never met him. And I'm one of those people that I don't like to take advantage of people like that. It's just, I guess, growing the way I grew up. So I really just kind of wanted to just, whoever is out there that's very respectful and nice, and we clicked together, we just kind of did it like that. And then from that, it led to many other avenues. There's a YouTuber, Jeff Chan, MMA Shredded, YouTuber, Lawrence Kenjin, Striking Breakdowns. I met all these guys just because I kind of was myself, if that makes sense. I see too much of the fight game where people are kind of selfish. They're your friend now because you're at the top of the game, and then when you're not, you lose a fight, everyone's gone. I've had sponsors that I've went through like that, so I don't really like that. It didn't leave a very good taste in my mouth, and I know for a fact that it's an easier route for you to take, to go that route, to like make friends with everyone, but there's a better story at the end of the day when I'm 60 or 70 and I'm done fighting. Do I look back and go like, man, look at all those connections I had and then it didn't go anywhere? Or do I want to build something from the ground up and, get somewhere with that brand? That's why a lot of my sponsors were built from the ground up. I reached out to them when I was an amateur, and if they believed in me then, and I stuck with them now. I had potential sponsors, like I'm just going to name drop really quick, like Adidas Taiwan. We were in talks before COVID. But if that contract, hypothetically speaking, breached my sponsor with Dynasty MMA, Illust, Street Clothing, and whatnot, I wasn't going to sell out like all that money for that opportunity, if that makes sense. I think it speaks a lot more about your character. And I don't know if you ever watched Game of Thrones, but like Jon Snow is like loyal and like kept an honor to a fault. So I kind of do see that aspect of it. But at the same time, I'm not going to go to this gym because they're, they have the powerhouse and they have all the connections. I'm definitely going to go there to learn from them and try to be a white belt and a fly on the wall and understand everything. And if these coaches would like to introduce me to someone, I'd be more than grateful to, and I would never forget it. But at the same time, I'm not going to go around asking these guys, for opportunities like that. I think the work will really speak for itself because, the old saying, actions speak louder than words, right?
Oh, for sure. Looking back at some of your all of your fights, like you described in your style being appealing to fans, but the footwork, the head movement, the defensive tactics while also, countering back with your own strikes. You fought in Muay Thai, right? Like a pro or amateur Muay Thai fight. I couldn't find that on Tapology.
I've done amateur Muay Thai fights. Yes. No pro fights.
Have you ever fought in boxing or Taekwondo or anything of that sort?
No, never. I've only ever started off with jiu-jitsu, and then I did Muay Thai at the age of 14, and then no box. I wish, that's one of my biggest regrets. I never did boxing. I wish I'd done boxing because I would love it. I would have competed every other weekend. That's what boxing gets to do. I like stuff that keeps you active. I wish before COVID I went to Thailand and just fought every weekend for like a freaking 3 months, out there. It would have been awesome. But it's something I'm very grateful for now that I have a fight coming up. But yeah, I haven't done any of those as a pro.
So how do what do you attribute your, footwork and head movement? It's so distinctly, when you see it, it's like, that can't just be like Muay Thai defensive. It is so reminiscent of certain boxing or, karate. It can remind you of Stephen Thompson at times. But also it's got the head movement as such boxing accents to it. So what do you attribute the growth of that to?
I attribute that to the lack of advantages I bring into a fight. And I do this, I get asked this question, different variations, but I give the same answer in a lot of these interviews and podcasts I've done. It's just, I've always been at a disadvantage. I was never born athletically strong, fast, or, explosive. So because I know that, I watch a lot of superhero movies. I made this example the other day to someone, but I'm like Batman with the Justice League, I'm like the only one that has no superpowers in a world of a bunch of guys with superpowers that are freak athletes. So how do I level the playing field? And I had to do a lot of psychological thinking, a lot of philosophy, which I'm into. I love reading philosophy and psychology books. So I realized, I'm like, look, I got to be honest with myself here. I'm not fast. I don't have a long reach. I don't have a six pack. I don't look intimidating. So what do I need to do? So then I looked into, I was always fond of magic growing up, like magicians and stuff. I'm into Lord of the Rings and whatnot, so I've always found that illusion was always something that intrigued me. So that's the way I describe my striking. It's like an illusion. It's like I'm there, but I'm not. And that's what led me to get my nickname, The Shadow, and I attribute it to I know what I suck at. So if you know what you suck at, you got to be honest with yourself. You can't be like one of those guys that's like, no, I'm like, I have knockout power. If I touch you, you're done. In my career, it's actually, I've always been told I can't do certain things. Like, hey, you're not that fast. Hey, you're not that strong. Hey, you can't do that, And everyone always says you can't do that. I kind of grew up around can't. The word can't reminisced with me a lot when I was younger because they always told me I couldn't. So I was like, you know what? Because everyone says I can't, and they know you shouldn't keep your hands down, they know you shouldn't dip your head down. What are you going to do if I dip my head down? You're going to try to punch me or kick me. If I know that, then I'm knowingly walking into a trap, knowing it's a trap, therefore I can react accordingly. So that's kind of where I was like, okay, who are the best boxers that have head movement? My favorite boxer of all time, Pernell Whitaker. I like Lomachenko now. And Muay Thai Saenchai, like the legend, Lurdzilla, all these guys that I watch were like very evasive. And I'm like, how are they able to do this? Dominic Cruz, TJ Dillashaw, Corey Sandhagen is one now. Frankie Edgar I was a huge fan of him growing up. I tried to fight like Aldo, but I'm not as explosive and I'm not as cool as him. So then, I had to take bits and pieces from a lot of these other fighters. And I realized that if you can never understand my style, or if you can't ever get a rhythm, a beat to it, you're always going to be adapting to what I'm doing. So you're a step behind, therefore I'm leading the dance. Even if I'm not punching you and I'm just doing weird stuff. It's stuff that you shouldn't do, but because I know the rules first already, I know to keep the hands up. I know how to do the basic stuff. I learned my jabs and crosses. Now now that I've learned the rules, I could break them. So that's what I kind of attribute my whole style and philosophy to, because a lot of times we're taught stuff in school. And then when we grow up, we realize that things are completely different, And I feel like that's the martial artist in me too. I just studied so much of other martial artists where they're like, hey, Bruce Lee is a very cliche saying, it's like, take what you like to learn, learn, and then discard the rest, discard what's not useful, and that's kind of the approach that I took to fighting, because I knew my disadvantages. So that's what led me to being so weird stylistically now. And it's just very hard to emulate,
Well, it's like, even, throughout your, fight history, it seems like you've adapted to the fact that, like, a lot of the shots you throw, when they connect, they're clearly jarring and they clearly are stinger, but they're not necessarily knockout shots, but they tend to stack up in huge volume by the end of 3 rounds.
Yeah, that's it's definitely okay. So that's very specific that you just kind of mentioned. That's like a philosophy I took from karate and kung fu. Kung fu back in the day was like, one hit, boom, you're done. Karate has that one punch, one kill mentality, So I was always very keen on being more accurate and precise than powerful. So a lot of people load up, their tense up their shots. You could see it coming. I'd like to be relaxed. And I built this. It's a really stupid thing. I actually don't think I've ever told this in any of my podcasts, but I used to put a quarter in a hot pan, like a hot pot. I forgot where I saw this, but I'd put a quarter in like close to boiling temperature water. Okay. So, it was really hot. And I'd stick my hand in there and grab it as fast as I could and pull it out before my hand burns. And I burnt my hand so many times. And when I did it, though, you have to understand, when you grab the quarter, your fingers have to be so fast to close your fists. Like it's like an explosion of a punch. And I looked into that philosophy a lot. It's like your hands are loose and open. So when you punch, you have you're not putting all your muscle fibers and clumping them together in like a bicep or like a forearm. You keep your hands open, nice and relaxed. And then when you throw your hand, it's relaxed until the very moment of impact. And that's what I think jars people, because it's so quick that they don't see it. And by the time their brain registers that they just got hit, it just got rattled, so they get thrown off even more. So now they're on the defensive. I make them think I'm either coming forward, or depending what opportunities that they give me, I either hit them with, I'm very patient. I think it stacks up over time. And like, that same mentality went with Charles Oliveira. He's been in the game for how long? Just became the lightweight champion. So I think it's about longevity. You got to think long-term, So that's where I think my style really differs from a lot of people, because it's not a template or it's not like a technique. It's more of a philosophy. So you could see what I do, and you can try to have your partner emulate it when you're training to fight against me. But the difference is, if you don't understand the philosophy, emulating all that is just kind of just going through the movement as opposed to understanding something, So that's, I think, where I'm a little different there.
Well, and after, they're trying to pin you up against the cage and you end up tripping them and slamming them on their back. And a few of the times that's happened. And, it seems like you break people by the end of fights. It seems like, you win by unanimous decision, not because you're not doing damage, but because you've done so much damage over the course of 2 rounds, but not, in the form of finishing blows, that it seems like a lot of guys just kind of accept their fate with you in the last round.
You know what, though? That's not a game plan. That's not what I have planned. it's because my last fight in Taiwan, I had my nose broken two weeks before the fight, so I was really cautious. I didn't want to pressure more than I needed to. The fight before that, I had a healing fractured shin. So going into that fight, even the one that I got the necktie in, I was very cautious. I was like, "Ooh, I don't want to overthrow than I needed to." But he shot desperately, paid the price because he made a mistake. But the fight before that, the 5-rounder title fight, that should have been a finish. Honestly, I'm very hard on myself. Those should have been finishes. My last fight, I should have finished him, but because of little nagging injuries going into fights, the broken nose, all that definitely paid. Like it paid. I had to pay a price for it. It was a sacrifice. And then also after my last Bellator fight, when I went back to Taiwan and fought Roberto, I was coming off a loss. No matter what, I needed to win. I felt like I needed to win for the sake of growing the sport more in Asia. So I think when my opponents break, it's not so much a game plan. And it's not even that I recognize that they're breaking. It's more like I'm giving them more than they can handle, but not enough for them to, be finished. And I think that's a mistake on my part, to be honest with you. That's inexperience. And I'm glad I had it, because now going into my next fight, if I even smell a hint of blood, or even if you look away from me for 1 second, I'm healthy. I'm hungry. I've been, quarantined this whole past year in California, right? So now I think if I smell blood, it's just, okay, I'm going to pressure you to where you're going to suffocate. I'm going to get those finishes because, honestly, who doesn't like finishes, right? So I will go for those finishes now a little bit more now that I healed up my shin injury. I've been working on some new stuff. A lot of the lessons I learned in my last few fights, they're slowly clicking together. They haven't yet. And even in my next fight, I don't think they will, but they will. It'll show a newer version of me. You're like, holy crap. I don't know if he's no longer a decision guy anymore. He's dangerous. You don't want to trade with me. You don't want to go to the ground with me because this and this. I really want to be a threat everywhere, not just, oh man, he doesn't finish people. I never want that to be in the back of someone's mind. So I think this next fight, you're going to see that change.
I mean, it's the variety of strikes too. Was it that Vergara fight where you hit him with that left body kick that you land in a lot of your fights with high power and volume, and that kind of buckled him for a second? And the ref was like, "Was that a nut shot?" And he was like, "Nope, that was to the body. Ow."
Yeah.
Yeah, that was you could tell that had ruined like a good chunk of hours for him. That your left body kick, that's a real staple throughout your fights.
I think it's not even my best kick, to be honest. My right leg is a strong one because I started off orthodox. It's just because when I fractured my right leg, I trained my left leg only. So then the left leg became a little bit more dangerous, but my right leg's still the stronger kick, I'll be honest. I just haven't really shown it yet. So that's kind of funny that you mentioned that. It's not something I do on purpose. It's not like my left kick's the killer and I want to, show everyone that I got like a miracle crow cop left leg. It's just, I haven't been able to throw my right leg because it took like a year and a half for it to fully heal. And I'm still training every day. So I'm not really letting it fully rest. But because of COVID and how like we had a quarantine, I had a year and a half off now almost. Man, my body's super healthy. I got so much time because I didn't have fights to heal up the body. So I think you're going to see like a different version of me because I don't have like a shoulder injury anymore, a right knee injury anymore, like nagging injuries that prevent me from performing to my fullest, and I understand now how to rehab the body and strengthen a little bit more. So I think you're going to see that difference. And then the left kick, yeah, as nice as it is, I can't wait till you see the right kick, man. It does more damage,
So yeah, by the time this fight rolls around, it'll be about a year and a half since your last fight.
Yeah.
And you're, through your you had 4 fights in 2018, 3 in 2019. And then this big layoff. So, what are the, the pros and cons of this layoff, and how do you think you're going to respond to it?
Pros are, I think there's only pros, to be honest with you. There's no such thing as a con anymore because it's perspective. If you see something as a pros and cons list, that means, your perspective is a little bit different. But I'll be honest, during COVID, there was a lot of thinking I had to do, like with the world and everything. I'm just grateful, that my opponent accepted. I'm happy that I got a fight. I'm just happy. I'm just grateful for the opportunity. So I don't care if it's like another 2 years I can fight until then. I'm going to cherish every single moment from here on out that I have in the cage. And at the end of the day, if you lose, who cares? When I'm 60 years old, 70 years old, retired, am I going to look back at this fight and go like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe I took that fight and lost. No, no one cares. Like GSP even talked about it. He's like, when you lose, you think the lady that's walking across the street thinks you're a loser. You go to Safeway, you get some groceries, the cashier thinks you're a loser. It's like, no one cares. That's the scary thing. That's different between me and a lot of these other fighters. Like, I lose. Okay, so what? Are you like, if you win a fight, how tired do you get? Like you're like, oh man, I want to take some time off. You have that mentality that you're burnt and overtrained. For me now, it's like, dude, every single time I can even make it a practice, I'm going to learn as much as I can because I didn't cherish it when I was training back then. When I was injured all the time, training with those injuries was not fun. So now I'm going to cherish all the moments I can to rehab my body, take time off. When I train, I put in all my effort, learn as much as I can, and humble myself every day. And I think that's what's really different. So there are no cons. I have a fight. I can't believe it. You're taking time out of your day to listen to me talk. I'm grateful for that. It'll add to my story when I'm done fighting. I will look back and just say, I'm glad I had that fight in 2021, despite all COVID. And I've never gotten COVID yet. I've tested about 50 times now. I'm not even kidding. I tested a lot because I have to teach privates and a lot of my clients just want to be safe. So I've tested a lot. I've never gotten COVID. So I'm grateful to be healthy. I'm grateful that I have an opportunity now to fight when a lot of other people still aren't, and regardless of what you think of COVID, a lot of people are still afraid. So they're still, at home wearing masks. They don't even work out. A lot of fighters fell off. I'm just honestly grateful and honored that I have this opportunity. So there's like no ill will to my opponent. If anything, I'm very thankful for him that he even accepted this fight because, Lord knows when I was going to get another one, so this is a great opportunity. And I don't think there's any cons to this. Yeah, ring rust might be a thing. But I mean, if anything, ring rust was my last few fights. Why? Because I had injuries going into it and I was very cautious and there's too much time in between the fights. Now I had so much time off to like grow. When you go in there, it's like, I either look like a whole new fighter or you either grow, right? Or you just don't. And then you have to go back and wonder why. You have to go back to the drawing board and like, I need to change this. So I think this is a great opportunity for me to really like get a reality check. Everyone always talks about all the lessons they learned, but how much of it do you get to put into practice? If you learn something, that's great, but how often do you practice it to where it becomes okay, this was a lesson because I know it, because every single time you do this, you remember the lesson that you learned, or it triggers that memory, so people say they learn all the time, but when the time counts or they get tested, they forget the lesson because, they don't practice it enough. And I definitely think I really practiced for this fight, for a lot of these lessons and the threats that I'm going to be facing. And again, like I got tired of doing so many interviews when I was in Taiwan too, but now I'm like, man, I miss talking to people, man. COVID it was kind of sad. So I'm just like, oh man, anyone that gives me an interview, I'm just grateful that they even want to listen to me talk. Cause I'm just a kid, that from Tracy went to Taiwan and became a pro fighter, so I'm very honored.
So what are your goals for the next 365 days?
After this fight, get as many fights as I can. Once Taiwan opens up, get more fights there. And then hopefully by this time next year, I'll get a contender series fight or like one of those bigger fights. In the meantime, I still think I need to build my resume a little bit more, get more fights with guys that have a little bit more fights, just so it looks better on the resume. Even though I don't think record says like you could be 2-1, but like better than a guy that's, 5-5 or 10-10, So I definitely just think I need a little bit more fights because I had so little amateur fight experience. So get as much experience again, get the ball rolling again, pick up where I left off in 2020, the last fight in January 12th. So just get that steam back. Once the world opens up more opportunities come in and just take advantage of those and don't, I got to make the most of every moment from here on out. It's no more just like, oh, I'm going through the motion. It's like every day I go into something, there's a lesson to be learned. I practice it and I use it to the best of my ability. So if another COVID happens, which I hope not, but let's say it does happen, I could look back and say, you know what, during the time when COVID wasn't around, I maximized my time and I did the best I could. So I have no regrets,
So I get a different answer. Did you get to like follow the UFC and Bellator a lot over the past year? A lot of people when, once they're pro fighters, they don't end up following MMA as much, or they end up following it much more.
No, I still keep, I look at it. I still pay attention to it just because, I consider these people colleagues, I'm not in the same organization, but I consider them colleagues because we're in the same business and gym, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Not just him, but like we're from the same like industry, so I just definitely pay attention to them and see like the state of my like MMA and where it is and how I can maximize opportunities and help grow the sport in MMA in either Asia, or how can I take advantage of certain um things that MMA is doing, like what are they doing that's so successful? How can I emulate it? How can I make it's like business? That's purely it. So I pay attention and tune in for business. And there's a lot of fights that intrigue me, like the whole Chandler fight. Whenever Aldo fights, some of my favorite fighters that I watched growing up, I do pay attention to them because it's cool.
So, who've been some of your favorite fighters to watch, like over 2020, 2021, where we saw a lot of guys kind of emerge with the opportunity of, fight cards every single weekend?
Yeah, so I got to support my fellow Asian Song Yadong, the 135 or 145. He's killer, man. Him and I chat sometimes on social media, Instagram. He's badass. I love watching him fight. It inspires me a little bit more to get better because he's just that much better already. He's younger than me, I believe, and he's already in the UFC. I'm like, what am I doing? Not to compare myself to others, but I use that as inspiration. There's a little difference, I think, and I love watching Frankie Edgar fight. He's just a hero no matter what to me. He's like
Love
Captain.
Frankie Edgar.
Like, I don't care that he lost to Corey Sandhagen. That doesn't erase anything in my eyes from the previous stuff that he's done. He's still a legend, 35. Used to fight at 55, man. Can you believe that? Like against some of those killers like Henderson and all that stuff. So I love watching his fights. Whenever Aldo fights, I tune in, like Aldo's like probably my top three favorite fighters of all time. I was glad to see Dominic Cruz get back in there because I took a huge part of my footwork game from him, so it was good to see those guys fight. But Peter Yan, that guy is something I'm currently paying attention to. Whenever he fights, I am ecstatic. I think he's like the newest generation of like what Aldo was back in the day, So I'm really curious on him. And then whenever McGregor fights, you tune in because he's the guy that elevated the sport to where it is today, So those are some of the guys that I pay attention to.
So the night of July 24th, when you will be fighting Alejandro Rodriguez in Colorado Combat Club 7, that is also when Corey Sandhagen is going to be fighting TJ Dillashaw. What do you think?
Yes.
What do you think about that matchup?
I got Corey Sandhagen. He has too much momentum going forward. Dillashaw's been out for a while. We don't know how his weight cut's going to do. Yeah, he's a disciplined guy. I'm not counting him out, but I go 60-40 Sandhagen. Sandhagen's just been on such a tear. And he's, man, I can't say enough good things about Sandhagen. But Dillashaw, it's like he's been there, done that. He's coming back, redemption. He has a little bit different of a motivation, but I don't think that motivation is enough to stop Sandhagen, to be honest. And Sandhagen's just so long and tall for the bantamweight division. I think it'll give Dillashaw a little bit of trouble, especially that he's been out for so long. I really do think that plays a factor. It's not like he's been out like me for a year and still training. It's shoulder surgeries. He was out for like almost 3 years, So I think by the time he fights, it's going to be like 3 years. So that's a long time off, without being in like the presence of like fighting, the adrenaline, a lot of sponsors. He's got a lot of responsibility going into that fight. And I think all the added pressure might just make him doubt himself a little bit. And it's no disrespect to him. This is my opinion, and I think Sandhagen's just so fast right now. And he's the hot fighter, so I think he wins, but I don't think Dillashaw is a pushover either,
That's the thing, Corey Sandhagen, what I've noticed, in his knockout of, Frankie in particular, but, the Marlon Moraes one before that, it's like the explosion, power, and body control he displays in his strike, how he can spin around with that knee and still hit you with such devastating power. The only thing is I'm going to be very interested to see if in a main event over 5 rounds, let's say he's not able to finish TJ, who's winning those exchanges and who's getting, beat to the punch on the grappling exchanges as well.
Yeah. I think those are really like curious. Like those are questions I'm going to be tuning in, after my fight, or if my fight's already done and then, they haven't gone yet, I'm definitely going to be paying attention because I think Sandhagen's like a very interesting, he's like a wild card in my opinion of the bantamweight division because he's weird. He's got good grappling, awkward, very off rhythm striking, different tempo in his striking. He's not like the typical striker, so as he switches stances too. So he's very interesting. So I look forward to seeing him in that division. I really think he's the awkward guy. And if there's a guy to beat Peter Yan, I think it's a taller fighter and someone who's just got a little bit longer reach to keep him at bay. I know Aljamain is taller and longer, but the thing is, he's not so much predominantly a striker, whereas Corey Sandhagen can strike, and he's got good enough grappling to, take, I think, Yan down or keep him at bay, so I think he's the guy that could do it in that division.
All right. So before we go tonight, Khai, is there any sponsors, friends, coaches, teammate, anybody like that you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, so there's too many to name off. So I just want to shout out my social media, because you can see all these sponsors on there. You can see all my coaches and everyone that supports me. A lot of them are on there. But if you could just follow me at Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, I believe they're all under @Khai Wu, KHAIWU. If you can't find me there, just Google my name, Khai Wu, and there's not many Khai Wus. That's why if you Google me, I'll pop up. so you could just do that. And I just appreciate all my sponsors that stuck with me from the beginning till now, and my management team, who's been awesome. I haven't fought for them yet, but I am going to soon in July 24th. Dodge Sports, shout out to them for getting me this fight.
All right, folks, that has been it for this Roto Baller Interlude Tap That episode. We have a 6-2 professional fighter, Khai the Shadow Wu, on tonight. Khai, thanks so much for being here. It was a great conversation. That was fantastic. So glad to have you on.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And anytime you want me on again, if you're interested, I'll be here.
Oh, absolutely. We'll have to make that happen. Great time. And best of luck to you in your fight coming up July 24th in Colorado Combat Club 7 against Alejandro Rodriguez.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, folks, we're going to be back to regular business next week with fights coming up. But until then, enjoy the NBA playoffs, of course. But then we'll get back to regular fight. ONE FC will be on this week, but then I believe we're back to PFL, Bellator, UFC the next week. So everybody have a great weekend. Until that, great time until that, all that business.